If our sound's coming through. Hold on. Hi, everybody. Just a sec. We're just going to make sure our sound's working. But I don't think, can anybody hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
For him,
it might be because of the TV.
Try it.
Yeah. Let me try this. How's that? Okay.
Oh, now I'm getting something. I think.
Maybe just feedback.
Good.
Hi.
Hi.
Loud and clear.
There we go.
There we go.
You can see our sound.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Can you hear us okay? Okay, we can't hear you very well. So that's a bit of a downside.
There we go. I heard a little bit.
You can hear bits here and there. Welcome to the Patreon live stream for this month.
Yes. Yeah, you hear just fine.
Oh, I think your sound's very delayed because we're hearing it now. Maybe if you just want to mute it for the moment. Okay. Now let's do that. Okay, well, hi for now. We can't hear you, but maybe we can resolve that in a few minutes and then talk to you a little bit. But we'll introduce ourselves and we'll start with James here.
Hey guys, I'm James. I'm an illustrator and art director here at Thought Cafe. Been working on Crash Course since the very beginning. Right now, I art direct Crash Course statistics and media literacy.
And I'm Susanna, and I am a co-founder of Thought Cafe and creative director. And then I jump in and out of Crash Course depending on what the needs are, kind of overseeing some of the production, branding, addressing things as they come up. So, yeah.
And I'm Jack. I'm an animator here at Thought Cafe. I work on a lot of Crash Course shows recently, like statistics, history of science, film, literature. Yeah, literature I worked on. Yeah, so quite a bit.
But really, physics is the big story there. That was the big challenge.
Yeah, it was years ago now.
Yeah, it's where you earned all your badges and all your stripes.
Yeah,
everything's been smooth sailing since physics, more or less.
Do you guys want to look at ourselves, or is this better? We're full screen of us. Or no?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so we've got people watching us on YouTube and some on Google Hangouts. That's how it's working?
Yes. So I believe the name is Nomen, or at least your username. I don't know if you can hear us. I'm going to try to unmute you and see if it works, just so we can say hi. I think, okay, we can't unmute you. Maybe you muted yourself, but hello. And thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions or want to interject and comment on anything, please feel free. We can't hear you for now, but yeah. So otherwise, yeah, we're kind of a little low key this month. We have a lot going on, just in terms of our live stream. We've done some really out there stuff. So, you might tune in one month and we might be doing like a virtual reality live stream, or have all the dogs here. Maybe we'll bring a dog or two in.
Sure, a dog will appear at some point.
Yeah. But we're busy branding, doing some series branding work. So we thought that maybe we would just chat a bit about what branding a series is like, because we have Jack here who's done some branding on a few different series now, with regards to animating and, figuring out once the different graphic segments we brand, once we have those done, we figure out how they're going to be animated. So we have Jack here to speak to that. And then James and I do a lot of the branding for different series as well, in terms of figuring out the design and how things are going to look. So what's the moment we find out what a Crash Course series is going to be, what's our first step?
Well, what we should have been doing all along, we actually just did it this time with a new show coming up. We've announced with the one we had the meetings about. Is that public knowledge?
The
special
history
show?
No, the one
History?
Or the
Orange.
science one?
the science one.
That one's good, yeah.
Okay, so with the new show that we're just starting to brand is Crash Course Engineering. And so what our first step is to talk with the US crew, because we're up here in Toronto in Canada. And basically we just have a meeting with the sort of the production crew down there and the consultants who wrote the shows, and just to get a sense of what the subject is about, because really at that point we don't have any knowledge about the show whatsoever. And so it's good when we touch base with them and get a sense of what the show is going to cover, what kind of segments are going to be recurring, if there's any kind of jokes that'll be going throughout. So we get an idea of that right up at the front. Once we've had a quick meeting with them about that, just to get our heads wrapped around it, then we have an internal meeting with all the creatives at the studio and just go through a sort of set list of design items that appear in all Crash Course shows. And then just if we can brainstorm any initial ideas of how something like a little side graphic might look different in engineering versus the other ones. Sometimes we keep it the same, other times it's really obvious how they need to look different. But at that meeting stage, it's really just about throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. Yeah.
And what would you say, like in our first conversations with them, or sometimes it happens just in email, when they do have recurring things that they've written in, like some examples we've had of that? Because there are recurring things like thought bubbles, but that's kind of on our end. But what James was referring to is like sometimes the writers or consultants will think of something that's relevant to the subject matter or not. It could just be a recurring joke that we play off of. Yeah. So I think there was like
in computer science, we had a segment called the levels of abstraction. An idea where take a really complicated subject and sort of break it down into simplified abstract levels. And so that was something that wasn't necessarily every episode, but it was something that we had an animated intro for. And other than that, sometimes we'd have other graphics that would go alongside it, but it's that kind of thing that we need to know beforehand so that we can animate that intro graphic at the beginning, know it's coming, and that we know that that's going to get placed in and you don't have to worry about it down the road. We can just use it over and over again.
And there's like a news thing?
For statistics.
Stats?
Yeah, it's been in a few episodes where they cut to kind of like a mock news report about some sort of, I guess, news story that involves statistics or whatever. One of the examples was the correlation episode where they showed a correlation between drownings in swimming pools and Nicolas Cage movie releases. Yeah. So, which, they're not related through causation, we hope, but correlation. So yeah, they sometimes just cut to these interesting segments, like levels of distraction or the news report, or even literature. Did the open letter concept?
Right. Oh yeah.
Right. That's John Green's sort of like open letter to the author, letter to all those kind of things. That was like the first instance of a recurring segment that we had. And some shows have played on that, some shows haven't. But it just depends. Sometimes it depends on the material. Some subject matters lend themselves better to that kind of thing.
What was the segment was it in U.S. history where we had the like sketches on the side?
Yeah, I think that, I'm not sure if that was, I can't remember what we called that, the open letter, or it was like a historical document. I can't remember what it was called, but it was John reading some kind of a letter or correspondence, and then he had to guess who wrote it.
So that was a great segment. We kind of shot ourselves in the foot with that one for branding it, because I think what we were doing is, it was a scrolling graphic with the type of, what was being said. And then to make it look kind of old, we like had it on this old paper texture, but then there were these little sketches that the artist would add to it that related to the type. Yeah. So like they pull out different words and concepts from that quote and like sketch things on the side, which seems like it wouldn't be a big deal or take a lot of time, but it actually took a lot of time. Yeah, because each one would have like 10 to 20 little sketches. Yeah. So it ended up at the initial branding stage, you're like, oh, that's cool. It's be like neat little sketches you can whip up in like 5 minutes. But when you're doing 40 episodes of it,
turned out the illustrators were like, "There's a lot of drawing just for this one little document." And so those are the kind of pitfalls we sort of watch out for now when we're branding. We try to, because we're busier now than we have ever been with like a show every day of the work week. We really have to consider how long each task takes and really try and simplify it. And so sometimes we'll sort of, at the beginning when we're really enthusiastic and excited, we sort of will bite off a bit more than we can chew. And after a couple episodes, realize that it just isn't efficient to keep it going. And so we'll cut segments. So the first couple episodes of any series can often be look and feel a little different than the final episodes, just because sometimes it takes us a little while to figure out what's working and what's not. But it's great working on shows like this because there's the leeway to do that. We don't have to come up with rules that are set in stone and stick to them the whole way through. It's a really malleable process.
Yeah. We have a comment from Fire Dragon, says, "Does Open Letter prompt a Hamilton song in anyone else's mind?"
Well, I'm not lucky enough to have seen Hamilton.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us have.
I've never seen it.
No.
Want to, though.
How many of you guys have? I'm pretty impressed with that. I think it's coming.
Was it here in Toronto?
No, it's coming to Toronto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Isn't it like already sold out?
Probably.
Yeah. But I guess the soundtrack, like everybody was listening to that soundtrack too.
I haven't actually listened to the soundtrack. I kind of want to
You
save
would
it.
love
Well, I
it.
kind of want to save it
wanna
until I
save
see it.
for the
Because,
show.
yeah, it's been like same with
Book of Mormon.
Book of Mormon. Same thing. I didn't want to hear the songs until I
Yeah.
saw the actual piece.
Yeah, the context.
Yeah. So with branding, like what James was saying earlier too, is when we have our like internal meeting where we start to look at, that's where we do our own brainstorming with our creative team. And it's not just, it's like not just the team that's going to be working on that series, but we try to involve as much of the studio as we can. So we have about 17 people working full-time every day at the moment. And almost everybody participates in those brainstorms. But of course, the key team working on that series is there and already decided. So that'll usually be an art director who's deciding and writing into the scripts what the animations are going to be. And then there's an animator and an illustrator. So it's usually a team of 3, sometimes 4. So the first thing we look at, we go through a list of all the things that need to be branded for that series. So the obvious thing is the logo. And I don't know if that's something everybody always notices, but every single show gets a revamped logo. I've thought about that a few times, how we've literally made probably 30 logos for Crash Course, because we have our starting base Crash Course logo, but then each series gets its own sort of makeover. And for that, we obviously replace the host's face. So yeah, this is kind of
computer
the
science
comp sci one. But we'll replace the host and figure out the color scheme, and then try to talk about or figure out what the object or elements are going to be in the logo to kind of represent, the subject matter. And sometimes that comes easily, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's Google searching in images, what pops up when you search engineering, because it is good to stick to sort of cliche, recognizable things. When it comes to a logo, you want it to be really simple and iconic.
Yeah, sometimes we feel a little embarrassed that we're just, let's just Google computer science and see what comes up. We're like, oh, that's a pretty good idea. Let's just go with that first image that popped up and just spruce it up a little bit. But it's definitely a good starting point. But now I think after a couple of really complicated shows where we tried to just sort of jump into our own brainstorming without talking to anybody on the sort of writer's side or the people who have already gone and shot it all, we realize we sit down to try and answer some of these visual questions without really having any of the knowledge that we should have. And so we've finally started to sort of improve that process.
Yeah, and a lot of work goes into creating logos, but because we already have our base, it is easier to we have to just replace certain elements in there.
Then there's coming up with colors that match the subject.
Yes. Yeah, it's what colors speak to engineering or whatever.
That's a good question.
Computer science, like.
I don't know why we picked orange. And
It's like a burnt orange and brown.
It was more like
Yeah.
vintage retro
Yeah,
computer. That was the
colors.
color idea on that one.
Early
Also,
operating systems.
yeah,
Like
also,
how games had the like neon 80s look.
yeah,
Yeah.
The color scheme.
Yeah.
and also then what we
History
have
of
done.
science is nice. It's kind of like it's like caramel apple,
Oh,
Yeah.
right?
Right,
It's like
right.
a green.
Yeah,
It's like a green and a bronze, and it makes.
Yeah, it's kind of subdued. It's like colorful, but subdued colorful, kind of like faded for the colors,
Why
at least
that's-
for the different.
Why that's history of science, though? I don't know. I don't know why it's
Kinda
history of
like-
science, but it looks good.
Well, we took a bit for that one. We took some inspiration from. I remember for one of the segments, I was looking at old kind of like natural illustrations, like of I don't know, like fungi, and like they're really colorful, but they're like vintage and kind of faded.
Mhm.
So it's like science and then history.
And our stuff's usually so vibrant that simply making it a little more
Yeah,
toned down is setting itself apart a bit.
more pastel-y.
But this all happens like as soon as one show ends, we sort of immediately have to get started on branding the next one. So this one, which one's ended? Film that's ending, or what did we just sociology? So regardless,
Sociology.
when a show ends,
Still got a few more weeks.
when a show ends, we sort of request that we get at least 4 to 5 weeks before the next one starts up. Used to be just 4, and now we're asking for a bit more because we're trying to, in that window, we're trying to brand the new show, but also we're really excited about this new Crash Course Recess project that I don't know how many of you guys have seen it, but we just aired one a couple weeks ago. It's the first one we put out, and it is a new sort of concept of a product that we want to make where it's all animated and it's just sort of like a one-off, quick, easy to watch, fun, interesting story that's just got a little more of a cinematic feel visually. So because we're trying to like sort of like flex some muscle on the visuals with the animation and the art as well, in a way that we're not always able to do in the individual episodes because we only have like a week to do them, essentially, a lot of times on everybody's end. So a lot of times you said we're not able to get really, really good lighting or more dramatic sort of perspective just because it takes too long. But we're really hoping with that recess will allow us to create these new one-off videos that really push the boundary and what we can achieve within the Crash Course style. And so we're already getting started on the second one. I'm not sure when we'll be able to air that, but it'll be soon. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. So we hope you guys enjoy it. And what's the thinking behind that name and logo?
Well, it's just the idea of taking a break from the regularly scheduled programming with the sort of really sort of rigid structure of how we air these shows. It's like each show is designed to sort of fit along with the curriculum of the different subjects. The ones that are following along with the subject, I know some of them are more just sort of general knowledge, but Recess being one that's just sort of like not quite as serious and more of just sort of like random stories or anecdotes that are related to the subjects that just didn't quite make it into the shows themselves. So stuff that like the writers were really interested in and wanted to tell, but just weren't able to fit it into one of the 40 episodes. And so it's been really fun, the idea of being able to go back and explore previous shows that maybe haven't aired for a year or two and have a story about a subject that you may be already a fan of, but haven't had new material from Crash Course in a while. We really like the idea of going back and giving you another story of whatever it might be, astronomy or philosophy or something like this. So that going forward was one thing that we're really excited about with Recess.
It's like a B-side.
Yeah.
Story B-side.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the bell in the logo too. Nice you have to say about the bell. Old reference though.
Bright neon colors to catch everyone's eye.
Yeah. So we discussed the logo first with branding, and then we kind of get into other segments that we do. So the segments that we do for every series, no matter what, are this like side graphic that's got the diamond. Mm-hmm. That one we just kind of change colors according to the color scheme we've set.
We tried early on to change it every show, but nothing ever worked.
So many different designs for that.
Nothing ever worked as good as the tried and tested diamond.
We've tried circles.
We've thrown textures though.
Yeah.
Film had a film texture behind it.
Mhm.
Even computer science, didn't it do the bits or the circuitry behind it?
Behind it, I mean, yeah, behind it maybe, but just the general shape and diagonal lines.
Yeah,
It's always,
especially the lines.
Well, and that's one of the first most like vintage things that we ever branded with Crash Course.
Yeah,
That was very early on. That's probably the first thing we tackled.
Kind of just diamond over the shoulder.
Yeah.
Look, I don't know if anyone even know what we're talking about.
We call it a ditty. Ditty.
Yeah, we've got our own language for all these things.
And it's like, it's in the shape of a diamond because there's a diamond in the logo. And then, so that it's not just a floating diamond, there's a diamond pattern that holds it in place.
Yeah.
So that's the thinking there. And then another big segment we'll brand is the unhistoric, which is a name we have for it. It's basically whenever we show a person, a photo of a historical figure or someone that's mentioned who, you know, deserves a momentary spotlight. So they're always stylized and colored a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we figure out like, those we've had some fun with recently. Some of them look quite different from other series, but yeah, just like what kind of backgrounds or elements might be floating around in there that relate to the subject matter. How do we want to display the name and those sorts of things. Yeah. And then, and sort of unsung hero of that is like, well, it doesn't even deserve that title, but we like have these joke boxes that have always been there. And we kind of figure that they're not given much attention. For people that do notice them and call them out, though, it makes us pretty happy. But we always think of a weird, punny, quirky, witty, like, name for those joke boxes that relate to the subject matter. And then someone has to come up with a joke every time one of them pops up. So.
Well, I kind of gave up on the joke element of it.
They're more just fact boxes.
Mine are more fact because I just had I could not come up with funny puns and jokes for those things. It's been
years now too.
Yeah, it's been over like half an hour, 40 minutes trying to come up with a stupid pun to go alongside Stephen Hawking. And I come up with something and be like, that's horribly offensive. And be like, can't use that. I'll just go with the fact. So if you notice them not being very funny and more fact-based, that's probably mine. And
like those are things that aren't in the script. Those are just like extra things we're throwing in there that, you know, it's a great partnership with the rest of the Crash Course team on the production side because they do let us play around and add little witty things here and there. But then, you know, we've given ourselves the task of being comedic joke writers, and not all of us have that knack.
Another thing too is like the one thing that stays the same is that we're always using photos or paintings of people that are just crazy colors, neon colors, very unrealistic colors. And that's always been the way it is. And there have been cases where we've done one and one of the writers or consultants will make a note just being concerned that we're not treating a certain person with enough respect by coloring them in a funny way. And the argument is always like, well, if we don't do it to this person, then it's almost more offensive because we're treating them differently than we've treated everyone else. And unless we choose like a racially sort of heavy color connection, that's one thing. But like as long as it's just a zany color like everyone else, then it's more offensive to not do that, to leave them out and treat them real, because then it's just opens a whole other can of worms. So when we treated everyone like that, then it seems to be a fun thing. We've never had an issue in any of the comments or anything like that. This is within how many years have we been doing it? So it seems to be something everyone understands that it's done in sort of like a more playful, respectful way.
Yeah. Have you had to write any fact boxes or lately?
No, it wasn't since like anatomy, I think.
Okay.
Oh, you did anatomy.
Yeah,
that's right.
I think
that was the first one, right?
Yeah.
First series.
The first series I worked on was anatomy. But yeah, they were. I think anatomy jokes are a lot easier. It's already a funny subject.
Yeah, that's true.
Physics is not funny.
Yeah. Yeah, some series lend themselves better than others to ideas like that.
History's a really good one.
Yeah, film wasn't so bad. You can get some jokes in film.
Yeah.
I remember like in anytime where I was annotating or writing those in, I would like look up the person on Wikipedia and try to find some weird fact about them or a quote of theirs and then try to like spin it off of that. But then I also started too often to like make a joke or a pun related to their name, and then I was just doing the same thing over and over again.
That word's fine. No one ever really notices them.
Yeah.
As long as it's not bad or wrong.
Joy said physics can be funny.
It can be funny unless you're bad at it and lack an understanding.
And
Which
you need a good understanding of something as your base to then make fun of it on top of it.
and not be under the gun for a deadline.
Yeah, oh yeah, and then there's deadlines, right?
So that segues perfectly into Sean's question: what made physics so difficult?
We don't know it. That's, to be honest, yeah. Okay, so what made it difficult is that, man, where do I begin with it?
We have a whiteboard.
It's like someone has to teach it to us. So it's the same actually with all of the sciences. It just came up more with physics. Is someone writes a script for the show explaining to the audience the topic. The problem is the script will reference images like, oh, you know, look at this or look at that. Now we're the ones who have to build these images, and if they don't send us a reference image, that can be difficult because either we have to go find it, make it up, or ask for one. So usually if you're a teacher in class, you have your prepared image and you say, look, you can clearly see these two things are the same or whatever, right? But between someone writing and someone making the art, we have to also decipher it, and we become the teachers, but we're not the writer. We don't have that knowledge. So we get it wrong sometimes.
And like they're not there while you're doing it, so like the delay in correspondence.
Yeah, like it's written like months before we actually animate it sometimes. Like the first batch will be done. So yeah, there's a delay to it. So yeah, it's just difficult because we are not experts in the subject. Sometimes
you would have to teach yourself essentially.
That's exactly what happened. Actually, we would do that a lot, especially in physics. Is we'd get a script, we'd go through it. Then we would go online and go to various other like websites, videos, whatever teaching assistance we can. And then we have to now understand the subject. Specifically when I worked on physiology, like anatomy and physiology being kind of like the movement and kinesiology, and then physics, these are movement. And as an animator, I have to accurately make these movements. Usually if you're doing something like telling a story through US history, you just make the characters do silly things. It doesn't matter if that's accurate. They kind of have noodle arms. Doesn't work if you're doing anatomy and bones have to be in specific locations. Same with physics. If something has to move with like a certain amount of friction or gravity, doesn't work if you just do it in a silly manner. So that's what made those shows harder, is that they had to be accurate in the way they were animated. That's how I figured it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so between you and Adam and Jess, that was like the team on it. It would just be like, they'd be off in a corner talking about all this crazy physics stuff and sort of teaching each other and trying to find errors and all these things. It was, everyone else in the studio was pretty glad they weren't part of it. So after that, you all got your sort of pick on which shows to work on.
Yeah.
It got better though. Like it was the first introductory to it because we also used calculus for our equations. And I don't know calculus. So there was a lot of heavy subject matter off the top, but definitely the last third or whatever got a lot easier because we just kind of built a structure that worked. So that
amongst yourselves?
Yeah, exactly. Like we started to understand our flow, like, you know, where to cite sources, where to look for, you know, how does this thing animate?
So Keith asked, is there a technical review for the animation after you create it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's vetted in some way.
Yeah.
Like from what I know, the script gets written and then it gets edited, and then when we get it, we do annotations which show what to draw and then what to animate, and then once we finish a first pass of animation, we send that off to some consultants that were hired by, I guess, Complexity would be the name. So those consultants will look at what was animated, send us notes back on what's wrong, what can be changed, what can be kind of made better. So we'll animate on, again, we'll do a second pass. And at that point, it's usually fine. And that's what goes to air. Sometimes we have to do a third or fourth pass. But usually we just animate twice.
Yeah.
The first pass, get it corrected, make the corrections. It goes onto YouTube.
And that could get complicated when it overlaps, because if you're on a fourth pass and then you guys are already animating like the next episode and then you're jumping back and forth, it can kind of compress the time as well.
Yeah, it only ever gets to third or fourth pass if there's a major problem with something's not being communicated properly. That's when it gets to that. Usually second pass, fine. We just need to maybe we catch a spelling error or I don't know, something, there's like a glitch in the animation or something.
Or if something could just be done with a bit more clarity, or if there was something, sometimes there's reference images that are given to us that might have more information than we need to show. So, and we get, maybe sometimes it happens where we get a little bit complicated on what the most important thing is. And then it's up to them to sort of look at it and be like, this wasn't the most important thing, and this other thing should be brought in as well. That's that kind of stuff. But we usually, on the more complicated shows, we know that there's chance that might happen. So the first pass might not be the complete polished one, because you know it might have to get changed. So then it's like, even if it's like you get the final approval, then maybe a couple things are done to it to bring it all the way. But it's a really well-oiled machine for all the shows, because we've all been doing this for long enough, and we have good relationships with the production crew in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And technology just gets better for us as well. Like other software and apps to assist us, with file transfer, how someone in another country can view the video and send notes back. Like years ago, that was harder.
Yeah.
There's every company keeps coming up with new communication apps for sharing information and working together, collaboration.
Right now, we have all our files, for the actual illustrated assets and our animated renders and everything is all in Dropbox. So when we upload a screener, we can also look in a Dropbox browser window, and all the consultants and the director and the editor can add their notes right in there. And like Jack was saying, there are a lot of other companies that do that and honestly do it a little bit better for that way. But just because we have everything already centralized on Dropbox, it just makes sense to keep it there, unless it's something that needs a lot more consulting, which statistics might go that way, just because it is nice to be able to put a note at a time, as opposed to just having a whole list of comments on the side of the video. That's really the main drawback with Dropbox. But
yeah, it's like the difference between YouTube, where you see a video and then you just leave your comment below, and something like SoundCloud, where you can leave a comment directly at a time code and say, right here is where an issue is.
Yeah, if for some of the shows, they usually don't have more than 2 or 3 comments, if any at all, from the consultants, but in which case something along the side is totally fine. But sometimes some of the episodes of the more complicated shows, you end up with 15 to 20 comments. It just makes it a lot easier when you can have them locked to a time code, as opposed to having to scroll through.
Use Spray.
Brandon was saying something about, I can't remember which one he was mentioning with statistics. We're going to try something out.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll figure that out after.
See?
Yeah.
There's always new software somewhere to try to see if it makes our workflow easier.
Cyjoy asked, do you have to use physics equations in the expression in AE to make the animations accurate?
We thought we did. See, leading up to animating physics, we were like, okay, let's make sure we have some sort of plugin or maybe make some expressions ahead of time that'll assist us. It turns out we never used them, because teaching physics, like animation, especially in a keyframe type motion environment, that is physics. It's just, you have a timeline, so there's your time. Then you can have velocity and acceleration. You have all of the elements from a physics equation already built into how animation software works. So it turned out if I needed something to travel a certain distance over a certain time or something like that, and that was the physics equation, I would actually just do the math on screen sometimes. I did that for rotational motion sometimes. There was one where I had to make a wheel rotate 360 over a certain distance, so I just knew to do whatever. I can't remember. Is it pi squared over to get the circumference? That's your distance, and that's how far it'll move. So I don't think I ever wrote specific expressions inside of After Effects for physics, but I did do some simple manual math just to say like, hey, so many pixels on screen is a meter, and then if something has to move so many meters per second, well, the timeline already has seconds. So yeah, it turned out to be a lot easier than I expected.
That's cool.
That is cool.
This is a good question. So Catherine Brewer said, how do you draw the line between expressing yourself as an artist with your aesthetic and showing that level of accuracy needed in these animations, like in physics or anatomy?
Yeah, if you want to talk about the art.
Yeah. Well, I know I wasn't involved in those shows, but I know those ones, it is a little harder to get some
Same with stats, though.
Yeah. It's the ones,
the accuracy of charts.
The science ones definitely are harder to sort of really just spread your wings creatively and come up with crazy stuff. That's why like the history ones are so much more fun, because you've got like the story you're telling, but you can set this story, even if it's like, if it says it's in a specific hospital, you can still make the hospital look crazy. You can make it look whatever you want. It doesn't have to look exactly like the real hospital does. Whereas with science, you have to show things have to be a certain way. So I think a lot of the times it just comes down to getting used to the show and knowing what the content is like on a week by week basis, and then finding areas to sort of around the central stuff to sort of come up with really crazy fun things to make it fun to watch, and also make it fun to actually draw and animate. Because I think that's an important part that we're having to focus on more now, is how to keep these shows fun for us working on them, so that we don't get burnt out on them. And that includes just cycling, having sort of pairing up with people and sort of going back and forth. We're still figuring these things out, but we're trying to be more, have open lines of communication about when people are getting bored with a show. Or even I was talking with one of our other art directors, illustrators yesterday, just about ways to write some of our animations in a way that makes it more fun and not feel as stale. And so it's fun to sometimes just like brainstorm with the different people in the team, and we all come up with different ideas. And sometimes if we don't talk about it, we sort of get stuck in our ways. So you just have to keep it in mind.
I will say with anatomy, like I do remember, because he doesn't work with us anymore, but Nick Counter did a lot of the branding and stylization for anatomy before it started. And I was involved with him a bit in that process. And like, that was really cool, because he found a way to visualize things like organs and like all the stuff that would be key to anatomy in a very, I don't know, artistically creative and interesting way. At least for him as an artist, he got to incorporate, we have that crash course baseline style that we stick to, but he got to kind of incorporate some subtle changes and elements to that style that felt unique enough that I think he had a lot of pride in creating that art, at least throughout the beginning. And obviously scenes got very, very complicated and had to be accurate in terms of like what was being shown and how, but strictly artistically speaking, I know that the style in anatomy was something that was very cool, because there's anatomical drawings are done in a certain way, and to kind of take those and simplify them, and even things like making like, I don't know, microbes look really cute, is like
just slap a face.
Yeah,
on everything.
he just added a bit of dimension to them and put some cute black eyeballs on them, and little stubby arms, and like that set the tone. Yeah. I didn't know when they were starting on that show, the idea of having to draw a crash course character with full proper anatomy. It's like,
oh my God, yeah.
We've got characters with big sphere heads and cylinder bodies, but you see the cross sections they did, both from like the front, the back, and even 3/4 angle. I was looking through it yesterday, and I'm amazed.
Luckily, that was the first episode, not enough animation.
Good.
I did not do that episode.
Well, and I remember Nick was trying to sort all that out before it started. Yeah. Like, how is an organism going to look? How are we going to take a crash course character who we've never shown the anatomy of before and do that in a way that still feels crash course but accurate? And
then it ended up being a wonderful poster.
Yeah.
So at the end, you now know what a crash course character looks on the inside.
Yeah.
Check it out.
And that they're never nudes, right?
If you haven't seen it, it's on dftba.com, the Crash Course channel. There's a ton of posters, but the anatomy one it's a literal work of art. But
it's a really good poster.
Yeah. It's
so much detail.
Definitely one of our best.
That was a good example where we always sort of like the idea of taking assets from a show and just throwing them together nicely to make a product at the end. But that was a really good example where we had all these cross sections and close-ups of different parts of human anatomy, and we're able to just have them populate around the sort of cross section of the body, and it looked so great. And then he put little like I think we put little number codes for each one of what episode they appeared in, and it's just like what turned out so nicely.
Yeah. I want that poster in my house. I don't know why I don't have it, or in my room.
We could probably make that happen.
Yeah. So yeah, and then and like just quickly on physics, like with branding physics, I know that we were looking at like steampunk as an option, but then we kind of went with this like spectrum color, kind of like, I don't know. I thought it ended up looking really, really cool. Like I think physics is actually one of my favorites in terms of how that one was branded. Because it's just so, you know, for a topic that I find really like intense and not approachable.
Yeah.
To me, that aesthetic makes it a lot more approachable. So, because I care about that a lot. But
to be specific, when you who was it? Catherine, who mentioned drawing the line between expressing yourself and you know, being accurate to what it is. There was actually one example of that. We had a ladder leaning against a wall, and the equation was not factoring in the friction on the wall. So we had to note that in a way. So we did it kind of in a fun way. We put this like sign on the wall that said like that this is a frictionless wall, but in a really like coy, fun way. So that's where we found taking something rigid. Is that the dog?
It's a dog. It's a dog knocking.
What if the dog wants in? So.
You can let her in.
Yeah, so it was just like something like that where it has to be expressed in a very specific and rigid way, but we kind of found like a fun way to express it. There was even a concern from the consultant, like, will the audience understand that this is a frictionless wall, like in this theoretical space? Because this kind of just looks like a joke. But yeah, so sometimes that's where we find our line. It's like, can we take something rigid and kind of express it in a fun way?
Yeah, you kind of think of it like, it's a lot of it's problem solving. You think of it like a Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner way, where you sort of like, you can change things in the environment. We're creating the environment that you're watching. So it's like, we can create the rules as well by like, that's a great idea of like, how do you show a frictionless wall? Just simple, put a sign up saying this wall has no friction. It's like, that's, we make the rules. There it is. You've called it out. It makes sense now, and it's funny. So it's like, I love those kind of solutions that you come upon. And sometimes you don't really think of it until you're sort of up in it, like pushed it back into a corner.
That was also one of the hardest episodes of physics. Yeah. So if you watch it, a lot of work went into it.
Which one was it? Do you remember what it was or what it's about?
No, it's the one with ladders. I don't know, it had something to do with rotation or something like that, but getting all the equations accurate in that episode took some time. We had to look up a lot. So, hard episode.
To answer Michael Rudd, who said, if you consider doing a course on evolutionary biology, the thing about that is we don't actually choose what courses Crash Course does. So the production team on the Crash Course side, they're located in Indiana and Missoula, the two different headquarters. They basically set out what the courses are going to be. So I think they probably know like next year's courses. We find out a little bit after.
Yeah.
But they set that based on, you know, I think even way beyond that, they have a whole list and plan of what courses and topics will be covered. There's some thrown in that are, you know, not necessarily planned for or expected or that come up organically. But yeah, we just we find out. We have quarterly meetings with the whole team where we find out what the next few courses are going to be. And then we start to prepare for those. So, I mean, biology would be great because there is a biology crash course, but we weren't actually involved in that. That was the first. So when world history ran, biology ran alongside it, and our team was only responsible for world history. And then when chemistry aired, which was the Missoula side show after biology, that's when we kind of took on all of it. So, or on that side of things too. So we've always wanted to redo biology because that would be really cool.
Yeah, revisit it.
revisit it and brand it, because
Bring it on.
early on, like the biology course had slightly different branding and an aesthetic, but it's also one of the very first shows, so it could totally use an update.
Yeah.
And evolutionary biology would be really cool.
Yeah. Going back to the branding bit, I'd like to mention it about an audience, just because like it's something we are always sort of going back and forth on. That is the design of our sort of thumbnails, what they look like, and what are best practices with that. And so every time we have a new show, we sort of discuss like what do we think is working, or like what is successful, what's going to get people more likely to click on something. And we don't really base it on anything other than the views on each show. We're not looking at any kind of statistics, really. We're not basing our designs on a thorough detective work on the statistics. We have some sort of best practices knowledge that we've learned along the way, but we've sort of, at this point, we sort of tried everything, with ones where we have big characters in the corner sort of doing something like pointing or holding a sword out, and then big words. We've had ones that are just big words. We've had ones that have multiple characters. A lot of times it depends on the show. Some shows don't have that many characters, so you're not going to throw a character on the thumbnail unless it's the host, but it's just things that keep it fresh. So we all have our own sort of personal favorites on which ones work, but I always love hearing from other people which ones they like, just because it's always good to hear. Can be a good thing that guides our design. Yeah,
and it's good to know what is engaging. Like, we have to play the clickbait game just a little bit to encourage people to educate themselves. And, it just applies to people floating around on YouTube that might not have heard of Crash Course, and it comes across as a suggested video, and we want it to stand out and grab people's attention. But more recently with the thumbnails too, we've been doing kind of like objects, which I think is really cool.
Oh yeah, like basing it after like a real thing. Like computer science was like a computer chip.
Yeah.
Theater
is the ticket.
Theater is the ticket. Crash Course Games was like a Super Nintendo cartridge. Those are really fun to design, and I think they.
Stats is a graphing calculator.
Yep, Stats is a graphing calculator. Might not be as exciting to some people as Super Nintendo, but hey, there's an audience for everything.
So Sean asked, we've talked about this kind of thing before, but we might have a different show in mind now. But if each of us had to make our own Crash Course, what would it be?
Still on music. I think that's a good one. Just whatever we want to do with it, like go through music history, you can go through composers, you can go through instruments, you can go through theory. There's a lot of branches of music. I don't think we've really touched on it, and I think there's a lot of buzz of people whenever Crash Course team does polls. Music's always somewhere up there.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I would want to work on a Crash Course music show, whatever that entails. That's where I would go.
What would you?
I think I have a couple right now. Like, definitely, I would love like a Crash Course sci-fi, science fiction, because I think there's a lot of learning there. I took a science fiction class in university, and it was one of my favorites ever, because it went into all the different classic sci-fi novels. Kind of the last season of literature, like, was focusing on dystopias. So there was a lot of sci-fi incorporated into that. So that was really exciting. But you can learn a lot about sort of the culture at the time that the sci-fi novel was written, and what the different fears and motivations were for that society at that time to, turn it into a sci-fi novel. So that's really interesting. I mean, there's some really old sci-fi novels about the moon and alien life on the moon, and there was a lot of fear around the moon because they were just starting to discover more about it, and they thought that, they could see tunnel systems on there. So like, there's just really cool stuff that can all tie into different sci-fi novels. Yeah, and then the one that we're also branding right now that we can't talk about, I would love it's happening. So yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to get ourselves into like a hairy situation.
No. Well, the sci-fi one, that could easily be literature season. They can do another one on that, not just dystopia.
Yeah.
My favorite shows, having worked on it, have always been the world history. So I would just love to do another season of that, because there's still so much we could talk about. And I love working on shows with John Group where John Green hosts. Just he like creates a lot of good opportunities for visual gags for us to throw stuff in. So that's fun. But for my own personal one, I'd probably want a paleontology just because I love dinosaurs and would love to learn more about them. And I'd love to come up with funny situations to put dinosaurs in.
That would be great.
Just have dinosaurs wearing clothes. Do anything you want.
Or even ancient stuff with like archaeology.
Yeah. Bring it on.
Yeah. What else do we have on branding? Oh yeah, so you talked about thumbnails.
Yep.
The other big thing we do is the type moments.
Right.
So for anyone that's kind of tuning in between questions, we're just kind of going through our branding process when it comes to a new series. So for the repeated segments that we brand, type is one. So that's kind of like full screen quotes and type that shows up. We play around with, what typeface, similar to the color thing. It's like what fonts or typefaces speak to this particular subject matter, which we used to stick to just sort of the crash course fonts, which if anyone's wondering is like Futura condensed. That's our main type family.
Medium or bold.
Medium or bold, yes. Extra bold is a recent addition to that.
Very nice.
And then we'll typically branch out of that to some secondary fonts, more fun sort of display fonts depending on the use. So yeah, those are kind of the major segments that we do.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it was starting with Crash Course Games where we started to have like 3 or 4 like really different animated type moments. Did you mention anything like that?
No.
Yeah, because like we found it was really cool with games where like each type moment we had of our templates was sort of based on our classic games. We had like a Zelda one, we had a Sonic the Hedgehog one, we had like an underwater Mario one. Can't remember. There was another one, sort of like Space Invaders, but it was really cool. Yeah, maybe Asteroids.
I don't remember.
But they were really fun to design, and then it ended up making those moments that once they're animated and designed at the beginning, we can use them throughout the entire series, where it was like all you have to do is change the words that appear in the middle, and you've got all these sort of cool animated sprites moving all around. So it ended up being a really, really good idea because it saved time, but ended up being a really interesting segment just to watch, even though it was one of the same that you'd cycle through every couple times you use it. But we ended up doing the same thing with computer science, where we had like 4 different types again, but each one was kind of like a different generation of computers. And it just really helped make it fresh and make it visually interesting without adding any work. So you do it all up front, and then it makes it really interesting. You sort of expand your toolkit for the rest of the series.
Yeah. So Catherine had to go, but thanked us for the detailed answer. And really appreciated everything we imparted in such a short time. And you're welcome, and thanks for tuning in.
A pleasure.
And then Michael asked, his daughter wants to know how we pick our character of the month, which is a great question. So every month, one of the perks we do is a paper doll. I think that's what that's referring to, right? So so we do a monthly character that we pick that we make into a paper doll. So basically we isolate the character and then different items and wardrobe pieces that can all be cut out and assembled. Which the thing we always want to know is if people are assembling them, if they're printing them out and assembling them, because that would be so fun to see. Because they do
seen any, haven't
no. We want, it says on it to tweet photos at us. So Michael, if your daughter ever puts one together, that would be awesome. Like you can send it to us or tweet it at us, and we'd love to share that with people because it should work. Like they have little stubs that you can, use to wrap around the character.
And how do we decide which one?
So that's kind of, so Nikki is our illustrator who puts those together every month, apart from the calendar that we do as well. And sometimes it is based on sort of like news that month or like popular culture news. Like if there's a big movie coming out, we've tied it to like the release of Star Wars in the past. So we've done a Star Wars character. What else? She did Scarlett Johansson. That's one that's coming out for April, but I'm not actually sure why. Sometimes she just chooses like. Yeah,
might not be anything other than she's going through our catalog and like finding a really cool character.
Yeah.
Pop culture, whatever is like particular to the day of the month.
Right.
It could be like, yeah, like it could have been an Easter
season.
character. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like holidays, or if something big happened in one of the episodes recently, like there was a cool character that was created for one of the shows. That's another way it's been done.
Oh, your daughter has a small army of them? That's amazing.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, definitely send us a photo. That would be
done,
really
like,
fun.
Like loops for fingers, you can do finger puppets, or like you can glue popsicle sticks to the back of them and actually put on your own Crash Course show.
That would be.
That's a great idea.
That would be so cool.
We've actually kind of talked about that as like fun little experimental stuff of like, what if we did not necessarily a whole episode, but segments or an offshoot of Crash Course, but like in a different animation style, like stop motion or like popsicle stick characters or something, just as like a one-off gag.
Yeah.
See what it's like to do it in a different style. Which I know a lot of people have mentioned doing Crash Course animation as a topic, but it'd be such an undertaking as we only animate in using like pretty much one type of software and one animation style. So
yeah, that'd be a recess.
Imagine animating like your After Effects interface. You know what I mean?
It's so
like
weird.
Pulling back.
That would be so meta, right? Or animating, drawing the character in Illustrator.
Yep, it would be.
Yeah, so, and we do have actually like tutorials we're working on.
We do.
That will be useful for anybody wondering more about the process. Those will be coming out soon. But basically we have a partnership with Adobe and we're working on, we took a sample episode of Mythology, I think, and then with the production team as well, kind of breaking apart the steps in that process. So editing, and then, you know, we're doing illustration, animation, and all of that. So you'll be able to see like all the detailed steps of a typical episode.
Yeah,
really cool.
It's designed for people who've never touched these programs before. So it's not fully comprehensive. It's just sort of get you started on it. But we're still chugging away on those, and hopefully we have those next month or two.
Sidejoy asked if any of us will be at VidCon this year, which is a great question.
I wish.
Yeah, I mean,
nice.
It is actually something we're talking about. We haven't been up until Crash Course has been, but like our team from Thought Cafe hasn't been yet. We went to NerdCon last year.
That was a blast.
We had so much fun, and it was such a great vibe and awesome to meet everybody there. But there is a possibility that we'll be there this year. It's not for sure. And we don't know who yet or what that's going to look like. There's some talks about a potential like animation workshop, but we are going to see. So stay tuned for that.
Is that in Anaheim?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that in the summer, or when do they do VidCon?
It's June 20th to 23rd, or is it July 20th to 23rd?
It's June.
Yeah.
So like right on the cusp of summertime. Okay.
Yeah. But if we're going, we're definitely going to be announcing that and making sure that everybody knows, because it's definitely our goal to go because we want to meet everybody, and it's a big one. You know.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
June.
June, yeah.
June, okay.
Yeah, 20th to 23rd, I think, are the dates. I know the dates, but not the month. Yeah, it doesn't help me. Yeah, we're almost, so we have like 2 minutes left, but I don't know if there's anything else with brand. Well, I mean, we didn't really get to the whole animation part of it, but we should wrap it up with kind of once it's all branded, and we're actually working on templates that make it a little easier on the animators to figure out how those segments are then animated. Mm-hmm. So you guys kind of take those segments we design, figure out how they're going to come in and out, right? And then we get them automated process. Yeah,
pretty much. So what all the different segments that were mentioned, we do like an over-the-shoulder look that we call a ditty. You know, type moments were mentioned, unhistoric. All of these ongoing looks get illustrated for the branding segment for this series. And then the animator will find out a way to animate it, whether that's like something that animates on, stays, kind of floats around, does its thing, and animates off, which is pretty much what's done for all of the segments. The bulk of the work is actually, I would say, the intro. That's like it takes about a week, I think, to animate the intro. We go through about 3 or 4 scenes even branding it's a huge undertaking.
That's
deciding
a whole other,
what
like,
aspect.
live stream.
It's like distilling
Yeah.
an entire series, 40 some odd episodes, into just the intro that's so many seconds. But then that gets animated as well. That's a huge part of it. But yeah, I mean, it's just usually a simple, how do you transition from the host shot to our graphics and transition out? And then that's something that we give to our in-house kind of like programmer, coder who works in scripting and expressions, so that it can be something very easily kind of like reused. So we can just kind of click a button, put it in place at the time we need it, and it'll run the in and out points for us. So we don't always have to keep animating how it comes on and comes off, just whatever the meat of the animation is. That's a huge part of it right there.
And that helps a lot, because aside from everything else that needs to be animated in the episode, you might have like, I don't know, 10 of those automated segments per episode, and then like 46 episodes. So it saves a lot of time.
Yeah, because we want to save as much of our time for the week we have allotted for the episode on characters, like the story part, the big full screen animations, because those can't be automated. Those are like on-demand graphics we build. They're not part of like, pretty much not part of the branding, really. Those are stuff that are tailored to the script for each episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
And pretty much does it for us, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. We could probably describe the intro process in a whole live stream next time.
Yeah. That's for next time.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with how History of Science turned out, though.
The intro?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also because I'm biased, because it was my idea.
It was.
But no, it looks really good too. It's a good idea. It was the
worlds.
best way to fit as many scientists into one as we can.
As if they're all at a high school science fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with how that turned out too.
Engineering might be cool, because we're talking about possibly isometric. We'll see if we do it.
Yeah.
But that would change things up. But yeah, so that's it for our live stream. Thank you so much to everybody that tuned in, and to I think your name was Namin, or I didn't remember the username, but Noman, yes, for tuning into the actual hangout. And yeah, just for hearing us out and asking us questions, and never hesitate to hit us up on like Twitter. Our handle is Thought Cafe for everything. So we're on Instagram too. I feel like a YouTuber signing off, but
thanks
for favorite, subscribe.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for donating.
Yes.
Keeping us going.
Absolutely.
We love making this stuff, so thank you for help contributing to that.
Keeping it free.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.